special meeting of the Cumberland School Committee meeting to order at 6:47 and ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Pleasure of the committee. Motion by Mr. DeMonica, second by Mr. Bennett. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries 7-0 with all members present. Next item is discussion and or vote to approve the fiscal 16 superintendent's budget. In advance of that, if there is anyone here for public comment who has any questions or comments, we can certainly take them now. Or if you have a question during any of our discussion, just raise your hand and we'll try to provide some resolution to the questions. So we did have a fiscal management subcommittee meeting a short time ago, seconds ago. And the fiscal management committee approved moving the budget forward to the full committee on a 3-0 vote. Mr. DeMonica, is there anything you want to add or you want to highlight about the discussion?
Well, yes, I mean, we did approve it 3-0, send it to the full committee. There are a couple of items in here that we've asked the superintendent to get us numbers for, and we included them in this budget. That part of it is hiring extra interventionists at the B.F. Norton, Garvin, and McCord schools. There's 4.5 teachers for math and 3.5 for reading. We've had Dr. Masterson come in, we had the principal from Garvin come in and talk about what the need is for interventionists for the kids to get them up to speed and get them where we want them to be up in the blues and so forth. And we know 9 new children came in just in Garvin since January, and all of them needed intervention. And we're just not reaching all the children we can. So we do have an ad in the budget that Dr. Thornton did not originally have. And we also are moving forward with our plan to start the high school later in the morning and the middle school a little bit earlier, and the elementaries, get them going as well. And that would entail bringing in the 8 buses. And if we don't do it now, we may not never get into the plan here the way the budget is happening with the funding formula. So we think it'll be a positive side for the children at the high school. Between detentions, trouble, achievement, and so forth, things will change dramatically. I think Mr. Duffy said upstairs about a 10% swing, something like that.
It depends on the research, and I've been doing some new research, and I'll bring that out in the next couple of meetings. But anywhere between 3 and 10% in different studies. But I'll get that with citations and stuff going forward for us to present to the town council as well.
So with that, Madam Chair, we did approve it 3-0 to send it to the full committee, and let's give it to the town council and see, and the mayor, and see how we can fund this and move education forward. We have 2 districts that need to be fully funded. So that was it.
Yes.
What is the cost associated with adding the 8 buses?
The cost associated with adding the 8 buses, Mr. DeMonica?
It was $469,000. And that would entail changing the whole town as far as how the buses are done and so forth. We'll have middle school jump in front of the high school, elementaries come after the high school, so it'll change dramatically. We are asking the legislature right now, who will be submitting to them. What happens is every child within that's not in our bus walking distance, walking routes, we're required to give them a seat, whether they use that seat or not. So we're asking the legislature to change it so that we can ask the parents, are you planning on using the bus next year? We have a lot of parents that drive their children. We have high school kids that drive with themselves and their friends. We may be able to save some money on just the busing alone to make this work. But we have to ask first. We just can't go ahead and roll it forward and say, do it. We have to provide that seat no matter what. A lot of our buses, let's say at the high school, leave half empty. And there's no reason for that. So your question, how much would the 8 buses cost? About $469,000. There may be some other savings. The state is talking, the governor is talking about eliminating busing for private schools. That could save money as well and bring this number down.
Anyone else?
Actually, I have a question.
Mr. Fiorello.
Dr. Thornton, the 469 for 8 buses, I thought that was just to realign the high school.
The whole model that I gave you with the high school is at 810, middle school 730, and the L's are at 2 different tiers, I believe, 3 tiers, 915, 810, and 8. The whole 8-school reorganization.
What time would middle school students be? I'm sorry, what time was the elementary schools?
There are 3 different tiers in the sheet you have in your Google Drive. I believe it's 915, or 910, excuse me, 815, and the earliest is 8.
8. And what time would middle school and elementary
Middle.
kids be at the bus stop?
It depends on the school.
Right, the earliest.
The earliest on the bus stop. That's probably peek at the sheet.
Because I know we had a concern about the kids standing in the dark.
Well, we modeled it, if you think back 2 years ago, we modeled it, we knew that, primarily speaking, we didn't want young children at the bus stop in the dark. That's historically, I would tell you why, a lot of times that high schools go earlier, not because it makes sense in terms of the clock in their body, but in terms of just that. But we modeled it where they weren't really changing the L's that much. The L's right now have been reserved, so like we have some early 8 o'clock or some later, 9, 10, right? So it's not really changing that much for the L's. We're at 8 o'clock for BF Norton. We're at 9:10 for Garvin, 9:10 for Ashton, 9:10 for Community, 8:15 for Color Hill. So BF Norton's the earliest, 8 o'clock. So go back an hour from that, if you will, for the worst case, I would imagine. Longest bus ride, give or take, 7 o'clock,
Like
7:15.
Yeah. Okay.
In the middles are 7:30, high school 8:10.
Anyone else have comments? So this would be the shortest meeting, so I think we have to talk a little bit more. So some of the legislation that's in the General Assembly does, is a bill sponsored by Senator Pearson that does request that the General Assembly make the local obligation to the funding formula whole. If something like that were enacted, there is also a clause in there about a transition plan that has the opportunity to help our community meet the obligation of the funding formula. If it were to be whole, in addition to the non-core money, the formulaic change to the district would be between $8 and $10 million, I think. So based on what the state presently doesn't provide in the transition plan, which is about $2.5 million short of what the 100% would be. In addition to that, what the town formula outcome would be. What Dr. Thornton has done over time is done a kind of a walkthrough of that budget to determine where the gaps are for our needs for students. And at present, we're at about a $5 million gap. So by formula, it's 9 or 10. By analysis, it's 5. What we talked about earlier in the budget meeting too was the fact that prior to the town setting the levy, it could make some adjustments to assist the schools in this budgeting practice. We also acknowledge that both we have a surplus of approximately $2.5 million. Mr. Prignano?
All sources about 3.8, but to change and undesignated.
Undesignated, and the town has an $11 million undesignated fund balance. So certainly there's some solutions there if the town so chooses. We're open and flexible to having that discussion about how we could create a solution strategy, pardon me, around what we can do to support students. If you read the editorial in the Providence Journal today, it did talk about the cost impact around having two districts, and really the cost savings isn't there to the degree that it's a one-for-one relationship with savings. I think the ask here is fair in that we understand we've had the teacher raises. There's an awareness on that with the last 3 years. We know the pension increase is, I'm sorry, Alex, I know you mentioned this earlier, it's $500,000. $554,000. The salary increase is 2.2. The charter school tuition is $823, but because not as many students went this year as was projected in the budget, the add is $653. Healthcare claims are increased by $130,000. Special ed tuitions, we've added $50,000. The E-rate is a $47,000 add. Technology one-to-one is $34,000. And then we've had some savings. Student transportation for $447,000. Vocational tuitions of $125,000. Staffing of $172,000. That includes three teacher budget decline.
Right, 3.2 reduction.
3.2 reduction, thank you. And Mr. DeMonica, the total, once we added in the bus and...
Total is, I'm sorry, the total is $63,158,454.
Thank you.
I have a question about with the charter school, public school tuition issue. And this number may not exist. I think I had talked to Bill about it. The numbers that are in the resolution say it costs X amount of dollars to send X amount of students to the charter school. If those came back, it would cost the district X amount of dollars. And then there's a difference taken to figure out as to what the loss is. Is there a number that reflects, and maybe this is what the funding formula would need to address and be tweaked in some way, but is there a number that exists that if those kids stay at the charter school, what is the actual loss to the district? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think the loss is the whole number, the 1.8 million is the loss. We're losing the whole amount. I just tried to illustrate in the 13-14 school year, I took the actual addresses of the students and put them back, and I can do it for 2 more teachers at BF Norton, 2 at one at middle school, a couple of buses, that kind of thing. And I had modeled, did down to supplies, the dollar amount, I believe I could do it to bring them back in. So I could do it at a fraction of the cost. So if they all stay there, I'm out the whole 1.8.
So I think your question was related to the revenue side of it. So if the student were in the district, we'd realize the state revenue, and then there would be a local share. So that local share would be at least the maintenance of effort. If they leave, they realize 100% of the local share. Our students don't realize 100% of the local share. We realize the prorated amount. Over 7 years, we will be made whole. But because they're a new grade, a new school, they realize 100% of the money. So the state share, day one.
Right, but the local piece is phased in, correct?
The local piece is phased in over 5 years.
Okay.
And so that is money that out of the town obligation would go to the charter school, not the state obligation.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I don't know, I'm still mulling over my head. It seems like if the kids are gonna go there, like I understand, maybe it's because I'm thinking of it as to a dollar for dollar. So if it costs, say $1 to send one student there, how much is the district losing?
Right. I often ask that question, if I could get an exact metric on the dollar.
Yes,
But
yes.
that's hard to do. If you take my proportion, I did it. I figured out around, say, 74 cents is the number I had as far as what I would.
So is that something that would need to be modified in the state funding formula?
I would say, marginal analysis probably isn't enough to make that
Right,
line-to-line
right.
snapshot. And, my assumption is 3/4 of the dollar is staying as a cost, but I'm not sure. They probably have to expand upon my concept, see if it's true, see if it proves out.
Right, right.
If you look at a community like in Massachusetts, what Massachusetts does with its funding formula, it's set a state share and a local share based on the community's need. And so for a community like Lowell, Massachusetts, they have a higher need because of their high SCS, and their community's ability to pay may be very different from a Dover Sherborne that has maybe a lower SCS, but has a greater ability to pay from a property tax perspective. So they set a threshold for each community. Your state share is this, your local share is that. Anything above that, they're completely allowed to do, so that's where you get a lot of the extras in your program. Additionally, what Massachusetts does is it says, for those communities that can't quite make up that local share, the state's going to help. In our situation, the state has said, yeah, we can't even make up our share, and we're not going to beholden the local community to anything beyond a maintenance of effort. That's deeply concerning if you have something like growing charter tuitions, which is what we have. And what we understand is, and we've used this $10 example that Mr. Duffy started, if you're year one and it's $10 to run your school district and your local obligations, that $10, and next year you open up a charter school, what's the maintenance of effort? We believe the maintenance of effort is $10. So we run in this challenge with the obligation around that. We know our obligation has increased somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000 for charter tuition. That alone is almost, of the budget that we have right now, 1/3 to 1/2 of our increase. So if we're level funded, we eat that, and it doesn't benefit the district students, which is, again, troubling. And this has been part of our request to create a funding strategy. What we see statewide is those communities that are receiving, that are higher affluence, and we're kind of at the top third of that. They're supporting their school communities, so their PPE is growing, whether they were a winning or a losing community on the state share. The less affluent communities are seeing a challenge because their local communities have used it as a tax break. So those communities like Woonsocket, which was a winning community by the funding formula, is actually going down in its PPE. So, I think some of the legislation in the General Assembly is intended to try and address some of that. You can look at somewhere like Massachusetts, and while it's not perfect, they have a formula that says, you owe X, we owe you Y as a state, and anything else is beyond that is to benefit your programs. And you can see that in their PPE. Probably more than they asked for.
No, I just find, I don't know why, but the same thought had occurred to me that Dr. Thornton apparently has worked through that notion that if it's $1 and the money follows them, but there's a loss to the district, even though what is the actual loss? Because if they legally they can go there, so what is the actual loss to the district? And I guess you can't determine that now.
It's hard to measure, but
Right.
that's 74%.
They want us to think we can close classrooms and close schools, but the lights still have to go on.
Oh.
The classrooms, I'm looking at the enrollment report right now at BF Norton, at the elementary schools, and a lot of these classrooms are at capacity right now. And they think, we take 30 kids or 300 kids and we can just close the building down or whatever. That can't happen.
Oh, no, I totally agree with you. I totally think that I'm on board with the fact that there is a loss and just trying to figure out what it actually is. Because I agree with you 100% that it doesn't work that way.
Mr. superintendent.
I was just going to add that I didn't know the answer when you asked me what kind of the same situation. The question makes sense. It does seem like in order to fix the funding formula, this needs to be figured out. If that's what we mean, right? If we mean change the funding formula so we're not sending more than we're saving,
Right.
we need to figure
Right.
that out. I haven't seen any numbers, but aside from some.
Here's one thought we had a while ago too. I was looking at all the districts in the state. We did a little analysis ourselves, Alice and I, looking at 4% of students were going out to the church, if you will. And there were 5 big districts. There was Central Falls at around 53%, Providence 18%, Pawtucket 17%, Cumberland 10%, we're 4th, Lincoln 9%. Everyone else in Rhode Island's like that 1%, 2%, that kind of thing. So our wonder was if the state did the formula over again, version 2.0, maybe you kind of have like almost like a tax bracket. After the 5th percentile, your health harmless are smoothed out, or something happens, you're not taking a hit. Right now we have 2% of our kids going out, it's going up. So there has to be some kind of way to smooth out the number. I don't think the lawmakers, hopefully not, didn't intend to have this happen to this magnitude, but it is, and there are 5 districts getting crushed by this right now.
Well, and you also have to look at the financial differences between one versus the other, where state share on one, we struggled to open up a full-day kindergarten program, and the state share for a student leaving was 100%, and for our students it was, a significant gap. And then secondly, while our local share is prorated as it leaves, the combined revenue that goes into that school means that the student going to BB Prep has a financial advantage because of that pooled money and the state share money. So that makes it a greater challenge. So we talked a little bit about the budget timeline with some of the hockey parents that were there advocating for their children. And as it typically works, we send this budget to the mayor's office. The mayor has an opportunity to review it and provide his recommendation. The council then would have an opportunity to deliberate over that. They need to have 2 votes from their committee to ratify the budget. I think that's the right word. But that process begins, the mayor provides his budget recommendation to the council sometime in April, I think, so between April and May. So that one would be when the majority of the activity would occur. And then should they honor our budget request, they could operationalize the changes. Should they not honor the requests, we would, during the month of June, I believe, we would reconcile the budget. The one thing that we did ask Dr. Thornton about, because we've had so much of a discussion around student achievement, and just to summarize, part of Mrs. Teal's work in Achievement Sub has been to, and we did this a few years ago, we go in and we have some of the academic folks come and talk to us about their programs in their schools. We've had McCourt Middle School and Garvin School come to talk about achievement gaps and how they're addressing them. And one of the revelations was that when we do put resources to students who have need, they show great growth. And what we recognized and acknowledged is we have a gap in that we can't address all of the student need in order to bring those kids up to and beyond grade level. What we have here is an ad for B.F. Norton, reading teacher, these are interventionists, of 1 teacher, 2.5 for math, for Garvin 1 teacher, for reading, 1 for math, for McCourt 1.5 for reading, and 1 for math, and that's in addition at McCourt for a half reading, half math, is that correct? So it would be 2 and 1.5 for math. And the rationale, I think, in bringing this forward in this way was twofold. One, if you look at the Garvin results, you recognize they've made significant improvement. If you look at the curriculum that's in place in our schools, particularly in the math area, you saw great gap closure. So we have a lot of confidence that if we were to put some of these solutions in place, we would have an opportunity to really help those students in those schools. And then year 2, it addresses it for Ashton, Cumberland Hill, Community, McCourt again, and North. It doesn't address the high school at this point. But what we said after year 2, Dr. Thornton could adjust staff. They may end up moving up as needed. The other thing we asked was if we're talking about gap closure and being flexible about our thinking, and given the book that we've been reading with Mr. Mitchell, and we never get to quite talk about because we either haven't all read the book or Mrs. Teal wasn't here last time, so I blame her. But the reality is it's about like thinking very creatively and proactively, and what we've asked Dr. Thornton to do is to pick a school and model how can we best address student achievement given some of the concerns that we've raised. So we're hoping during the next few months he'll be coming forward to talk a little bit more about areas like extending the day or hyper-focusing on certain levels of achievement, but understanding that kids still need things like PE and science and art. So we hope to learn a little bit more about that. So what we have before us, yes, Mr. Duffy? Oh, Mrs. Teal.
I just wanted to, sort of singing to the choir at this point, but in achievement, those presentations were very interesting because it certainly reinforced that we've been making really good decisions about curriculum, really good decisions about professional development, and that targeted interventions do work. Part of what this ask will allow us to do is more focused interventions. So instead of trying to meet the needs of 20 children that are struggling, maybe we can break it down and we're going to meet the needs of 9 kids, and maybe these 9 kids are struggling on a very specific math skill. So it should help these kids even faster rather than trying to do it in such large groups. Same with the reading. And part of supporting this budget is to understand that we've made really good progress in a lot of areas, and if we're level funded and we don't receive some of the items that we're asking for, the funding that we're asking for, because of what's going on with the charter schools, that's going to directly impact everything that's left. So if we're level funded and 80% of our money goes to the charter schools, those gains that we're making with professional development and the investments we're making in the technology and the investments we're making with our curriculum and all of those other programs, they're at risk because there is not going to be the money to support that and to continue those achievements. And that would be totally sending the district in the wrong direction. And it's just not fair to the students anymore that we know what works, we know how to do this better, we know what these kids are missing. We talk about interventionists for the children that are struggling, but we really have very few discussions about what about the kids at the other end of the spectrum, and we still haven't yet put a robust gifted program into our school district. We still don't have a robust, a foreign language I think it's crazy that we're not starting a foreign language in the elementary schools. We're a global society, and we're raising children that don't have appreciation for the environment or the economic environment they're going to work in by not knowing a second language. There's so many things that need to be taking place here, and to continue to allow the district to be level funded or absorb the cost of the charter schools without recognizing the cost of that is just grossly unfair. And I think it says a lot about our community. I think it says a lot about how we value our students and what we really wish for them. And it's really not the community that I think the majority of us want to live in. And it's important that as you're listening to this and as you go to these meetings that you really strongly advocate and express what's your vision, what is the community you want to live in. Because it's very easy to say, I want to be budget neutral, I want to not raise taxes, but there's a cost for not doing those things too. And I think it's been too easy, especially given where we had come from an economic standpoint. It was easy to make that argument. I think it should become a little more difficult to make that argument to these kids now. So thank you.
Mr. Duffy.
Thank you. So the question I have is, I want to find out what the impact is if we are level funded. So if last year if we were 59 million and change, right? So if we were to receive the level funded as exactly what we had last year, aside from the stuff that we were looking to add, exactly what is the dollar figure that we are contractually obligated to send out and send out to the charter schools, the other increases that are, how much are we looking at that we would actually have to cut from the budget?
Generally speaking, without the 651, around $1.5 million, that's my number. Minus 651, so around $1.5 million would be reducing. That's the number in my head.
So if we were if the town level funded us, we would have $1.5 million we would have to cut. That's not including the buses or the Chromebooks or any interventionists and stuff we wanted to add. We would have to find those cuts within last year's budget, I'll say.
Yes, the current bus compensation and intervention compensation, the $955K, that come off the top. If you don't get the 651, which is in the base, that's part of the reduction. And then the other $1 million in a few dollars that I propose to you all, 2.5%, around $1.5 million, give or take, is the number I have that I'll be reducing by.
So my next question is, if we were level funded by the town and we had to cut $1.5 million from our budget, where would you recommend we cut $1.5 million on our budget?
Well, as you know, I always prepare for those things. I've already started that list in my head. I played through a lot of times. Honestly, haven't hit the whole $1.5 million. I have the first 700, and it's not good. It's things like, middle school sports, 30,000, high school sections, take away from high school sections. It's more staffing. It's capital. We're doing a phase 2 plan for capital. We sent our homework to RIDE, and we have money in the budget to do the capital because, we fund our own capital. And I'd be cutting that, which is kind of counterintuitive. But that will be on the list, a couple $100,000 there. So after around the first 700, as bad as it gets, the last 800 would be very bad.
Well, I don't want to push, but I think that at some point we have to have that very bad discussion if the town decides to level fund us so that we can have that. So I think that we, as a committee, have to understand that, and the people in the town have to understand that if we are level funded, exactly what that would truly mean for our school district.
I'm with you. I'm very transparent. I'm personally, I'm a glass half full person. I'm optimistic. I won't have to make that list, but I've already started to make a list just in case. But I would have that in front of you at the right time.
Thank you.
Mr. Salvatore?
I apologize, I left my binder in the car, I was rushing it out. But what percentage is the teacher increase?
It was a 0 past 2 years for step increases. This year it's a 4% increase.
So represents how much?
2.2.
Thank you.
And that's with the present staff and any minor adjustments that you've made.
That's right.
So if it were cut, we certainly could have staffing reductions that may include closing classrooms or teaching assistants or...
And also, in terms of trying to further develop that list for you in my mind, I think about these things. You're not really talking about cutting much more in the way of, say, classroom teachers can't aid, because it is what it is. You're talking about that second circle, intervention, taking what we already have and whittling that away. You're talking about the other stuff, the second circle. You're talking about guidance. You're talking about those auxiliary things on the second tier. The classrooms are what they are. You have to have a teacher in front of 25 kids. You're not going to reduce those. It's those other things.
Mr. Denning.
Dr. Thornton, are there guidelines for interventionists, like how many we would need or we should have?
Where typically what we've talked about is 36-to-1 ratio.
And where does this put us?
Right now, if we do this new list I gave you, that puts us where we want to be.
Okay.
Also keeping in mind, these are fluid numbers, and the staffing will keep being adjusted by what the caseload, but that would help us greatly. Currently, we have some schools that are at that ratio, and some schools not even close, depending on the need.
But this would put us there.
Yep.
Thank you.
So talking a little bit about depending on their need, what we've asked administration to do for their presentations. One of the pieces of information that Mrs. Bassignani had was the Garmin student profile, and out of 400 students, roughly 25% of them are free, and then a small percentage are reduced. And Dr. Masterson shared with us this evening that of the students at the court, 36% of them are free lunch, 9% are reduced, 8% of them are ELL, and 19% of them are special education. So the part of that conversation talked about just when students are coming in, some of them have pretty significant gaps. Those that are free lunch students often have the most concerning gaps around their learning, that this ask that we're adding to this helps to try to buffer. And the other ask is, can we create a model that really kind of flips on its head the way we instruct kids and the way that they learn, and do we need to kind of change our thinking around this? So we'll be excited to learn more about that.
Madam Chair, I mean, the Valley Breeze just recently printed an interview from the ELL staff. We have 25 languages in the elementary schools, 25 languages to deal with. How do we get there without money? I mean, that's what it comes down to. We have a town council that's going to consider tomorrow night allowing apartments in the bottom floors of commercial buildings. I mean, what would that do to us? To bring in more children that would be in commercial buildings, they're not buying houses, so those children will need services as well. Town council needs to step up. The mayor needs to help out as well and come up with a plan, and not just a 2-year plan when everyone's elected for 2 years. It has to be a roadmap down the street.
Yeah, and to the council's credit, they have provided us with added, nearly meeting our request over the last few years. So they have taken steps. They have supported the Chromebook initiative, so that has absolutely helped. But I think the magnitude of the gap is so severe that it really takes some intestinal fortitude to begin to understand it and to begin to address it. And it's really hard to do it in a budget meeting like we typically do, where we have a presentation and they ask a handful of questions. And our budget is big and it's cumbersome, and there's a tremendous amount of information. So I'm hoping that the conversations we've had over the last few years about establishing some good karma amongst ourselves, I hope that continues, because I know often we talk a bit about the gloom and doom of it. I think because we're so close to the kids that come to our meetings and talk about their French trip, and then we know we could be making some decisions that could be detrimental to their school program. Anyone else? Any other questions? So, as we discussed the last time, in the budget meeting, we talked a bit about the fact that we added, Mr. DeMarca, do you have the amount of the add and then the total?
The amount of the ad was $995,631, and the total amount is $63,158,454.
And that was added on top of Dr. Thornton's proposed budget of $62,162,823.
That is correct.
And when we acted on this during our last budget, I know you articulated what we did last year.
Chair, the full committee voted to send the budget to the mayor, to the town council, without taking a formal number, because we're precluded by law from asking more than 4%. And we're asking more than 4% here, and let the town council and the mayor decide how they want to fund us, because they can always give us more than 4%. By law, we cannot ask for anything more than 4%, and we want more than 4% to do it right.
Thank you. So
we send the budget that was approved upstairs in the Finance Subcommittee in the amount of $63,158,454 to their consideration. And that we did not take a formal number here. We send the budget from Finance.
Do I have a second?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Second by Mr. Salvatore. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0. I appreciate that. I would say I would not want to cancel the next meeting. I think if we just ensure that a quorum of members are here in case folks from the public have any questions, and certainly a member of the administration to clarify any of those questions, but the vote's been taken. Should someone reconsider their vote, we can certainly take that matter up at that time as well, but I wouldn't want to just cancel the meeting given that it is budget season. Mrs. Teal?
And, sorry, and can we formally request that if the unfortunate happens, what can you prepare those numbers and so that we can begin the discussion? At least people understand what's at risk.
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
I just want to, absolutely, I would like to see that because I think that people need to know exactly what we need to cut. But also even just a basic before that, because when I did the rough numbers and we sat here, because I know we have an increase in state aid, just to show this is where we were in. Because, like you said, just with the teachers alone, it's a $2 million because they took it 0 to 0. Add, but we're only looking at cutting 1.5, but that's because of the increase in state aid. So even just a basic, you know, 3-line, this is the revenue, increased revenue coming in, not a full budget, so we can, very little, just, this is where the increase in revenue is, and this is exactly what we would have to cut. Because I think that I need to know that, I think that the public needs to know exactly if we are level funded, what it would mean.
And also the 651. Sort of, if that's, I mean, that's part of what are our assumptions here. So I guess the town council knows that at this point.
I think we made that clear in our joint meeting.
We did.
Yep.
Any other public comment? Mr.
I just want to remind the public, we are meeting at April 2nd, excuse me, at 7:30 down here again, so if you want to come out.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Duffy, motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All those in favor? We are adjourned at 7:00.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Cumberland School Committee meeting to order and ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Pleasure of the committee. Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Second by Mr. Denon. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Note for the record, Mr. Duffy is not present at this time, but shall be returning. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Does anyone in the public wish to speak? We have one item on the agenda tonight, and it is the fiscal 16 budget that the committee approved at the last meeting to send to the town. That's correct, Mr. Fierro. We forwarded it to the town with some amendments by the committee. Please note for the record the arrival of Mr. Duffy. Hey. All right, hearing none. So we did vote at the last meeting, and does anyone have any further comment? This will be a very short, tidy meeting.
Madam Chair, I think we sent an appropriate budget request to the town council and the mayor that serves the needs of the children of the Cumberland public school system. And I have full confidence that the mayor will send us the funds necessary to treat these children the same way we treat the other children in town and fund us at 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Anyone else?
I have a question about the process. Does this get put on the web tomorrow, or how does that work?
So, Mr. Brignano?
Well, we haven't sent it, they'll send it to the towns Monday, the day it's due.
Once that happens, we'll put it on the district.
Great, thank you.
And then the updated, Mr. Pagano, that'll be the updated budget that we.
The 63 change that you did the other night, yeah, oh, absolutely, that's the budget we'll send out.
Appreciate that. Mr. Duffy?
So when we took, when we passed it on Tuesday, it wasn't sent at that time to the town before they did the levy vote?
That's-
Well, I thought we did it Tuesday so that we could get it to them before they did the levy vote. That's why I thought we moved it ahead, that's all. I was
No,
just
the
confused.
requirement is that it be delivered by the first Monday in April. So we've met that obligation. We voted on it on Tuesday. There were no other questions, and it seemed like the committee had motivation to send it forward.
No, yeah, I thought we were going to send it to the town at that point before the Wednesday meeting. That's all, that was what my question
No
was. But did not
obligation
get
around
that
that.
time. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.
Mr. DeMonica?
The vote that the town council took last night was for the levy, was for the budget that they're in right now that expires June 30th. It's not for the future coming up year. And so that's what they voted on last night.
That's right.
Yes, Mr. Duffy?
Just for clarity, I think some of the discussion we had earlier in the week was that they might be able to adjust the levy that they voted on earlier this week so that we could get the maximum dollars so that way we wouldn't be in excess of the 4%. That was my understanding.
Mr. DeMonica?
That was not their plan last night to expend us any additional monies. It was to cover what they had for this year's budget. And that was it.
Based on the collections that were received, yes. Anyone else? All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Fiorello, second by Mr. Denon. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And we are adjourned at 7:57. Thank you.